Now, Patrick, let's talk about misleading headlines and percentages. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do. We do. You and I both very passionate about making sure that the average real estate investor that's out there, whether they have one door, 10 doors, 100 doors, understand that these headlines and my gosh, the clickbait that's going on right now is incredible. And we're in a place right now because we're at the bottom of a cycle. We're at a place where the headlines upcoming are going to be sensational. You're already starting to see it, Patrick, like the headline about active listings, like the headline about condo prices selling for above list price. All this stuff is really going to get the market in a tizzy, and as investors, we got to be able to see through this clutter.
I think, the message here, first and foremost, we talk about clickbait headlines and we make fun of it. But the problem isn't the clickbait headline. The problem is that people don't go beyond the headline. So they're actually just reading the headline as if that's giving them the information. When you actually open and read the article and take the time to kind of dissect what's being said, sometimes there's great information in there that's really valuable. I think the thing that in this particular segment is that we got to talk about and shine a light on is that when things are being expressed as percentages, it can be very dramatic. When we say, well, listings are up 80%, like, okay, well then let's look at what the number really means. And what the number really means is it's not off the charts odd. It's up 80% compared to what? So if, like I said before, if I had two and all of a sudden I've got four, holy cow, things have doubled if I only look at it as a percentage. So the point of this is that when we see these percentages, we have to dig a little bit deeper and go, what's behind the percentage? What's the real numbers, so that we're not being driven emotionally. We're actually looking at data. And percentages don't always give us the best indicator and aren't real data unless we have something and a context, a benchmark that we can measure them against, really.
I think that's the advice right there. That's the advice I'd like to impart onto people and real estate investors that are reading various, publications and so on and so forth. Anytime you see a percentage, you should do two things immediately. Number one, look past the percentage and try to get the real number, and then compare that number to the trend. And as soon as you do that, you get the truth of what's actually happening. Forget the percentage, look for the number and compare that number to the trend. And then you actually can make an educated decision, a data driven decision on what it means to you.
Well, I think, and you said something that is really important. We went through an epic past 2 years in the housing market in terms of pricing and sales, and everything was amazing and everybody was a real estate investor genius. And then all of a sudden things come off. They were coming off at epic highs. And then if you express that as a percentage, guess what? It feels like you're hitting epic lows. But to your point, you use the term, and I think everybody needs to look at this. If you look at sales and if you look at prices, they're coming back to the trend line. Now, if they bust through the trend line, maybe that's a different conversation. But they haven't bust through the trend line. Yeah, prices are down in some areas, let's say 20%, 25%. But there's just as many areas that they're not really down at all, number one. And secondly, even though they're down 20%, in some areas, they're still 30% above even 2018, 2019 levels. So a lot of these sales and a lot of these prices are coming back to the trend. And I think that's where we get really messed up if we're looking at percentages.
Love it, Patrick. So true. Misleading percentage headlines covered. Ooh, I missed the camera on that one. All right, next, Patrick. A couple weeks ago on an episode of this show, we talked about student rentals. And I was saying, and I was asking the question, whether or not we're seeing a lot of student rentals, because it's something that used to be huge right before the pandemic. And yeah, right before the pandemic, mostly, I was getting a lot of questions. It seemed like every second phone call I was getting is somebody trying to convert a single family to a rental, specifically a student rental, in order to maximize cash flow. That entire thing went away during pandemic because the schools got shut down and so on and so forth. My question to you was, are we seeing the resurgence of that? And funny, just by asking the question, I guess it came back into my sphere. I've had several requests to manage student rentals for our company at Vistor Property Management in the last couple of weeks. Now, we don't do that at Vistor, but the point I'm making here is it is starting to creep back up. People are now saying, hey, we should get back into student rentals. What are you seeing from your perspective?
Well, listen, I've been hearing a lot about it. And when we look at the volume of international students coming into the country versus the supply, if you're an international student and if you're really in the trenches of it, you're calling it a crisis, a housing crisis. And, if you're that international student, the cost of a room, the cost of what you're getting is literally like a closet in some cases. But what's interesting about that is some people are getting very innovative with what they're doing. And so there's a couple of I don't know what the regions are specifically in Ontario, but what they're doing is they're taking what we would refer to as a McMansion and they're turning it into a rooming house, not only for international students, but non-permanent residents. And so there's 4 and 5 places to park. They're renting out rooms with a central area. They're being very diligent in their choosing their tenants, so screening their tenants. And so what's interesting about it is the feedback so far is that these large homes are being turned into rooming houses. They have lots of parking. They have adults that are living in there and no children. And they have adults that are living in there. They have got a central area because they've got, let's say, a basement. They've got a family room. They've got different central areas for people to show up in. And they're charging as much as $1,000, $1,500 for the room. And of course, the use of kitchen facilities overall.
Oh, okay.
So it's an interesting way to solve a problem. Somebody may be tapping into the opportunity, but I thought it was quite creative. And that's the crisis that we're at, is that's the kind of tactics that are being used.
All I got to say about this tactic, Patrick, is if an investor wants to get into that, get ready, be ready, understand what the hell you're getting into, because that is a rough business to run. Let me tell you, even if you think, oh, it's going to be students and they're fantastic and the students are very wealthy coming over, whatever story you have around there, trust me, I've seen many of them. It's a very rough business. And what I mean by rough is it's very intensive. You need to do a lot of hands-on management. And if you think you're just going to farm this out to a management company, most management companies don't manage those because they're so intensive. So just be aware before you get into that business. Just be aware of that is all I got to say, Pat.
Yeah, but it goes back to the point of, when we talked about international students, it is actually, if you're in the trenches of it, if you're that student, supply isn't there. If you're that university, but there's lots of politics behind it, right? And the reality of it is international students bring billions into the country, and they bring multi-millions into a municipal area. Universities have a tendency and are being accused of being, I guess, overzealous with how they allow and how many students they bring in.
I'll tell you what is a fantastic tactic, though, Patrick, is if you're a student yourself and you should definitely buy a property and turn your own house into a student rental, assuming 100%. You're a student. That is a phenomenal strategy. Second phenomenal strategy is if you're an investor and you partner with a student to do it and make them a part of the business. That's also could be a phenomenal idea, Patrick. But student rentals, definitely something to be aware of.
100%.
Good shot.
If you're interested in learning about investing in real estate the right way, look at our Real Estate Investing in Canada program. 15 steps to successfully investing in real estate. Thousands of real estate investors have learned the right way to invest in real estate following those 15 steps. You're absolutely going to love that program. Take a look, click on the link in the description below.
If you want to see more stuff like this, click here. If you want to see the entire show, click there.